Government and the state. So this is our bare bones definition of government. Okay, it's an institution that protects society. Okay, it serves society. In parentheses there, you see all kinds of different examples of things that it does: maintaining order, providing different services, whether that might be social services or healthcare for the elderly. We also have our elected leadership. Okay, but a government's an institution. All right, it's for society. It's designed to help society. All right, even communist governments, as buns as it sounds. Okay, appropriate use of the word buns there, right? Okay, as buns as it sounds, even communist governments, in theory, are supposed to help people. Okay, even though we could make a million reasons or provide a million cases for why that's not true. Okay, communist governments, in my opinion, always fall short. All right, so that's what a government is. It provides all those things. It looks different from place to place. All right, the services that are provided in the United States might be a little different than the services that are provided in the United Kingdom or in Mexico or elsewhere around the world. Nonetheless, all of these states, nations, countries, however you want to call them, have a government. Okay, governments exist, again, to organize people, to protect them, and do all those fun and great things. All right, so the different laws and such, okay, or the public policies that a government puts into place, that's kind of what it aims to do. So, for example, in the United States, we have federal laws that prohibit having certain drugs. Okay, for example, we have the Controlled Substances Act. That is put into place to, ideally to keep Americans safe, okay, to prevent bad things from happening in the United States. But we also have laws that pertain to education, right? Especially when it comes to like educational funding. Now, like the whole law about being 16 before a person can quit school, which again is a poor economic choice, that's more of a state law, okay? It's kind of a fuzzy issue. We call it federalism. We'll talk more about it later. But the things the government wants to do, we call those public policies, all right? Education, military, human services like providing, Social Security or welfare or whatever it might be. Those things are all policies, okay? The laws that kind of surround those. And we could go on and on about categories, all right? So again, government's an institution. The things it does, it's called its policies. Those policies then relate to whether it be the military, education, human services, so on and so forth, and etc. All right, so I'll give you guys a second with that, and then we'll continue on. But that's a bare bones definition, okay? And then we have different types of governments that we'll get into here as well today. And again, just a review from last year, if you see the blue term, that's a key one, right? That's an important one. It's worth knowing, right? Kind of like in the movie Dumb and Dumber, the IOU for $250,000 for the Lambo. It's worth hanging on to that one, okay? All right, so the blue ones are important. As we talk about government, I also understand that governments have 3 different types of powers, okay? Every government in the world, whether it's a democracy, a dictatorship, whether it's a communist government, every government, even North Korea, where they have one cat running the show for the time being, has 3 different types of power, okay? And those powers are what they use to achieve their goals. You're going to notice these 3 words are probably familiar to you guys. Legislative, executive, judicial, right? It's the same name as our 3 branches of government. So legislative power refers to the ability to make laws. In the United States, at the federal level, does anybody know what body holds legislative power? It's Congress, right? Congress, our U.S. House of Representatives and our Senate, they hold legislative power. Congress, their primary function, Sam, is to do what? They make laws. Okay, very good. That's legislative power. At the state level in North Dakota, we have what's called the Legislative Assembly. It's out in Bismarck. I was hoping to maybe bring you guys this year. With the way the world is right now, that probably won't happen. As of right now, things could change though, right? Things could change. There was some info out the other day that they're kicking out vaccines, which kind of makes me nervous. But anywho, moving on, okay? Executive power, okay? Executive power, that's the power to enforce laws. Now, in the United States, our head executive is one of the most powerful people in the world. They have the title of what? President, right? So right now, President Trump, love him, hate him, however, he is the executive of the United States. He is the president. He is the head of the executive branch. It also might be worth knowing, and we're going to talk more about each of these 3 branches later on, kind of independently of one another. It is worth knowing that in the United States, our executive branch is the largest of all three branches. And when I say largest, I mean it has the most people that work for it. Okay? Because the executive branch is not just the president and the vice president. The executive branch of the United States is the president, the vice president, all of their advisors, all of the departments, like Department of Homeland Security, Treasury, Natural Resources, Department of the Interior, Department of State, Department of Defense. We have a lot of them, okay? And then underneath those departments, we have things like the FBI and the DEA and the ATF and the FCC and the SEC and all these other agencies that enforce laws. The executive branch, seniors, is large. It's a huge umbrella. It's like an octopus. Who's ever seen an octopus? Right? It's got its tentacles and everything. That's the executive branch. Okay, but they enforce laws. And then our third, okay, every government in the world has judicial power. And that's the power to interpret law. What do laws actually mean? And if you ever look at a law, they're not very specific. And there's a reason for that. And that's leaving for open to interpretation to a judicial branch. So the judicial branch, that's like your court system. They're the referee. They determine this is what means. This is what the law means. They interpret the law. So every government in the world has these three types of power. Okay? It looks pretty similar in most democratic nations, with the exception of Russia, because Russia is really not a democracy. That's my inside joke. But for the most part, those powers are going to look fairly similar in all democratic nations. In other places that are not democratic, they look a little different. Nonetheless, it's worth knowing that every nation state in the world possesses those three types of power. Very important. Okay? You don't need to write this down right now. Understand that most countries have a constitution that kind of discuss this. We're going to do a lot with the U.S. Constitution later. But constitutions exist to kind of, it's like the rule book, essentially. Except our constitution's not very large. All right? But every country has one. Some look different than the others. Fun fact, maybe a bonus question on a test for those of you that are still into the bonus questions. Guess what country has the world's oldest constitution that's still in effect? Guess. Who? Ours. The United States Constitution is the world's oldest constitution still in effect. Every other country in the past 240 some odd years has changed constitutions. The United States, we have amended ours a few times. We've added things to it. We've taken things out. But every other country in the past 240 years has gone to a completely brand new constitution except us. Okay? Because ours is, it's been effective. Okay, there's parts that maybe need to change, but it's been effective at none the least. All right? So we start talking about politics, and we won't get into, political opinion right now. I think we did at the beginning of class with our whole Buffalo wing conversation. That was about as political as I wanted to get on the second day of school. Maybe later on, when we get closer to election season, we'll play politics. But politics. Politics is the process that determines how we use our power. Ultimately, what politics is, it's what gets done. What the government decides to do. That's political. And there's winners and losers. Because the people that get what they want, they're the winners. The people that don't, they're the losers, quote unquote. Okay? But it's worth understanding this. Okay? And the United States right now is very politically divided. Democrats and Republicans. You guys are picking up what I'm putting down on that? Mm-hmm. And we don't need to get into, I'm a Democrat and I'm a Republican. We don't need to get into that right now. We will, I promise. We'll play that game. Okay, we'll go down that road. And we're going to be respectful to one another when we do. But understand this. Political parties, politicians, they want what's best. They also want what's best for them, what's best for the people of the state they represent, the people of their district, and maybe what's best for, maybe their pocketbook, or to get reelected. But nonetheless, politicians want what's best. Here's the issue, though, and where it becomes divisive. Politicians over here and politicians over here, do they agree on how that should look? That's the issue. Democrats, Republicans, they both want what's best for the United States. They really do. It's just that the opinions of the Democrats and the opinions of the Republicans they're polar opposites. There's not a whole lot in between anymore. There's not a lot of people left in the middle. And it's kind of an unfortunate thing. Politics has become very polarized in the United States, where you have ideas that are far one way and ideas that are far the other. Okay, there's not a lot of middle ground anymore. They're not as open to compromise, I guess you could say. But that's politics, and politics refers to the process, how we divide up our resources. What time or how much time do we spend discussing laws? How much money gets spent on education versus the military? Now, here's a fun fact. The United States, again, even with the pandemic going on, we are still one of the healthiest countries, like financially, economically, however you want to say it. We are. We're very powerful in that regard. Okay? But here's the deal. All this money the United States has in our budget, I know you can say, well, we're like $23 trillion in debt and counting. It's nuts. Okay? It's crazy how much debt we have. But the other thing is this, is we also have a lot of money coming in and such, right? When the United States maybe overextends itself at times. I don't know. The argument can be made. But here's the deal. What is the most what is the most well-funded entity of the United States government? Military. Billions and billions of dollars a year. Okay? Then after that, you start talking about some of like the different social services and such. But the military, like hands and knees above everything else, is the most well-funded part of our government. We put a lot of money into it. When was the last time the United States actually fought a quote-unquote a war? I mean, it's been a while. So there's those that say we spend too much on that. There are those that say, well, our security is number one, we have to spend the most on the military. And that's where it gets political. You guys get that? That's politics. Okay? And politics, I mean, at least we have the freedom to have them. Some countries aren't as fortunate, but it would be nice if we weren't so divided on it. Okay? Questions on that? All right, we're going to get a little bit into types of government, and then I think that'll wrap us up. We're going at a pretty good pace here. Make sure you stop me if you have a question. So we'll talk some types of government. Talk democracy first, because we like democracy. It's one of the things the Greeks did very well, right? They helped us and they developed democracy, where people get to vote. They get to vote for their leaders. They get to vote on certain laws, maybe. And there's varying types of democracy. The United States, we are a form of democracy. Our democracy looks different than the democracy in the United Kingdom. It looks different than the democracy they have in Canada. It looks different than the democracy in Mexico. Nonetheless, democracy, it varies. There's different forms of it. But essentially what democracy is, it's government by the people, where ultimately the majority rules. Okay? Majority rules through the process of voting. All right, I know there might be some of you that say, hey, Mr. Earl, hold the phone. If that is the case, and in 2016, if Hillary Clinton had 2.5 million more votes than Donald Trump, how did Donald Trump become president? Well, it's because we used an electoral system of voting for president. Everything else is a majority vote. We'll talk electoral college here later on, come November, but we'll leave it alone for now. Okay, but varying forms of democracy exist all over the world. All right, the United States, we are just a form of democracy. If you ask me, Mr. Rowe, specifically, what type of government do we have? I would call it one of two things. I would either call it a representative democracy or a republic. They're kind of the same idea. And here's what I mean by that, okay? So we've already established at the federal level who makes laws. What's that body called again? Congress, right? Congress. Congress has legislative power. Okay, we'll talk more about Congress, right? U.S. Congress holds legislative power federally in the United States. Now, North Dakota, we elect 3 people to Congress. We elect a member of the House of Representatives, just one because our population is very small. His name's Kelly Armstrong. Anybody know the names of our 2 senators? Anybody? John Hoban, anybody? Heard of John Hoban?
Heard of him. And there was Heidi Heitkamp.
There was Heidi Heitkamp. The other senator's name is Kevin Cramer. Okay? Kevin Cramer, right? So those are the 3 people we send to Congress. We send 1 person to the House, and then like every other state, we send 2 people to the Senate. Now, when the time comes to vote on something in Congress, do all of us get to go there and voice our opinion? No. We elect representatives to do that for us. We elect congressmen and congresswomen to go and do that. That's a republic. So we as voters give those politicians their power. We can also take that power away by doing what? Voting for somebody else the next election cycle, right? That's a republic. Okay? So we give that power to politicians to represent us. Okay, we do. So we can call ourselves a representative democracy, or we can call ourselves a republic, either or. Okay? Most people would say that a republic is probably a more fitting term. Questions about that? Now, if we did what the ancient Greeks used to do, like Mr. Norman used to talk to you guys about, well, what they would do in Athens or in Sparta or wherever, what they would do is once you hit a certain age, assuming that you had your military service and you own land and all these different things, you get to go and sit in the assembly, right? And you get to vote on everything. Every matter that came there, they would vote on. They call it like a direct democracy. Why wouldn't direct democracy work in the United States right now?
People have lives.
People have lives.
Other things to do.
We also have about 320 million people that live in the United States. Of those 320 million, we'll say about a third of them are eligible voters, meaning they're 18, they're U.S. citizens, and they haven't lost the right to vote because they committed a felony. By the way, if you commit a felony, you might lose the right to vote. So legal advice from Mr. Rowe, don't commit a felony. Okay, best advice I'll ever give you. All right? So if we asked those, say, a third of 320 million would be like, what, 110 million? Okay? If we asked the 110 million eligible voters to go to Washington, D.C. every time they wanted to vote on a federal law, would that be efficient? No, it couldn't happen. It'd be impossible. That is why we can't use a direct democracy. That's why we use a republic or a representative democracy. All right? Getting into our last couple of things here. Dictatorships, those are bad. That's when a single person has all the power. Or a small group of people, right? That'd be called like an oligarchy. It's kind of a fun one, oligarchy. That's a dictatorship. I would understand that generally speaking in a dictatorship, do the people who live there have a lot of rights? No, right? The government controls a lot of stuff. Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union. I would argue that Russia today is still a dictatorship to some degree, but we'll leave it alone for now. But dictatorships. Now, some people would say, well, hey, Mr. Rowe, like in Iraq, people voted in Saddam Hussein how many times? Well, get this. In Iraq, how many names appeared on the ballot? One, right? It was kind of like a make-believe election to make it look legit. That's a dictatorship, right? It's kind of sick. But usually a single person has power or a small group of people, kind of like in Soviet Russia. If you start having like a small group of people, you call it more of like an oligarchy. And generally speaking, these dictatorships are authoritarian, again, meaning all aspects of life are controlled. Where you go to school, what you do when you grow up. Do you get to vote or not vote? Do you get to have a high-paying job? All those different things. It's very authoritarian. Whereas in comparison, in a democracy like the United States, we know what our rights are. Okay? We know what they are. And as life goes on, you generally acquire more, like the right to vote and have a driver's license, the right to the age to go and serve in the military if you want to, et cetera, right? So in a dictatorship, a lot of times people don't have a lot of rights. Businesses are often told what they have to produce. Can you imagine if the United States were that way and telling Nike shoes, hey, by the way, you can only make black tennis shoes? I think some of us would go nuts. Like, oh my God, I can't get the neon yellow ones. But yeah, that's what happens in a dictatorship. The government takes a lot of economic control. All right? Then our last thing here for today, I see some of us are still writing. I'll slow down here. Because I want to make sure you get some time to work on the gummy bears. It'll be fun. I was going to bring in real ones, but then I determined if you put gummy bears on your desk, COVID. It ruined everything, right? Ruined everything. 2021 has to be better, seniors. That's my promise to you guys. Okay? I can't guarantee it, obviously, but I promise you it's going to be better. And we get to graduate McCade, right? That'll be exciting. Last one. What's that?
Did you graduate from West Fargo?
I did. 2008, man.
Yeah.
I did. Yes, I know graduate. I said graduate McCade on purpose. Okay.
That's the joke in my family. We graduated from West Fargo.
Oh, yeah.
My family, all of them did.
Here, excuse me. Excuse me really quick. I'm going to sneak in here. Here's a young, dashing senior in high school, Mr. Rowe. Look at that guy.
Yeah, didn't you have the picture up there for a while?
Yeah, with Nate Kine. Yeah. Because that was my promise to him for 1 year. Look at that thick head of hair. Where did my hair go? It's still there. It's thin.
But it's still there.
It's still hair though, right? We're keeping it forever. That's the bet that I have with Mr. Butler. He's like, Mr. Rowe, when are you just going to shave it off? I said never, because I'm stubborn. All right. But a monarchy, So a monarchy is a little different than a dictatorship because monarchs come to rule usually not through power, but through who their mommy and daddy were, right? Monarchies still exist. Most monarchies that still exist, the monarch's usually not that powerful. So like Elizabeth II, everybody hears about Elizabeth II usually. She's been the queen of Britain, I guess, for like 65 years. She doesn't really have that much political power anymore because the United Kingdom has changed a little bit. She's more ceremonial than she is anything. But in a monarchy, again, it's usually a king or a queen who's in charge. Okay? It's very old, like kind of like medieval times-ish. But a lot of that is based off of not who got voted for, because voting's not a thing in a monarchy, but it's who mommy and daddy were. Okay? Who married who? What is the religion? So monarchies still exist. Obviously, it's just not as widespread as a person might have seen, 300, 400, 500 years ago, right? Okay, so once we have that, we are going to stop there for now. Okay, so you can close your notebooks.